Hi, my name is Samantha Cataldo and I'm the Associate Curator of Contemporary Art here at the Worcester Art Museum. Today I'm going to be talking about an artwork that's in our collection and in our current special exhibition, Faith Ringgold, Freedom to Say What I Please. The artwork is called Picasso Studio and it was created by the artist in 1991. This is the work here, and as you can see, it's a large-scale painting that's also a quilt. This is a form that the artist, Faith Ringgold, innovated and started creating in the 80s and early 90s. The artist has been working for over 6 decades, and this is probably her most well-known form. So what you're looking at in the center here is a painting, much in a traditional sense. It's surrounded by a quilted border, and then on the top and bottom registers, you can see that there is a handwritten story, hence the name Story Quilt. So Ringgold has combined these 3 different types of art, storytelling in terms of the words, painting, the central image, and quilt making. She was inspired to create this form by various different influences, one of them being her mother, who was a fashion designer and helped her with a lot of these early quilts that she made. Another being the African-American quilting tradition in general. Another is an international influence, which is a Tibetan tanga, which is a hanging scroll made of silk with a central painting, which she saw on one of her first trips to Europe in a European museum. The other reason that Ringgold started creating this form is out of necessity in a way. She wanted to be unencumbered by the large paintings she was making. So she decided that in order to be more self-sufficient, in order to bring her own paintings where she wanted to display them, not have to rely on her husband or anyone else to help her, she created a form that could be easily rolled up and taken. So rather than having a big framed painting that was very heavy, took up a lot of room, she had these kind of soft forms that could be rolled up and taken where she wanted to go. She also wanted to get her stories out there. Faith had become more well known for her paintings that she had been making for a few decades by this point, but she was also doing more storytelling and also experimenting in textiles. And so this form gave her a way to combine all of those things into this inventive form. This quilt, Picasso Studio, is actually one in a series of 12 in a longer series called the French Collection. The French Collection tells this fictional story about a woman named William Marie Simone, who in the 1920s went from America to Paris to become an artist, to kind of find herself and be inspired there. Throughout this longer story that's told through this quilt and the 11 others, she has many different adventures. She gets married, she has children, she interacts with luminaries and artists of that time. And it's also very much a fantasy because it can be anachronistic, meaning that some figures who are alive in this fantasy wouldn't have actually lived at the same time. This quilt, this painting, shows this one specific part of the story where William Marie Simone, who is the Black woman at the center of this painting, is modeling for Pablo Picasso, who is seen here in the lower left. So one of the instances where there's something anachronistic happening in the story, meaning that there's someone who didn't quite look the same way or live around that same time, is the way that Ringgold has painted Picasso. So in this picture here, in this painting here, he looks as he would have appeared probably post-World War II when he was a much older man. At the time that this fictional story is happening, set in the 1920s, Picasso would have only been about 40. So that was probably something that Ringgold actually does on purpose. So again, in the center, you have William Marie, who is modeling for Picasso, who stands at a blank canvas, perhaps preparing to paint her. Behind her is a finished canvas of Les Demoiselles d'Avignon from 1907, which is one of Picasso's most well-known paintings. And it's well known for several reasons. One is that many people cite it as sort of the beginning of modern art. It was his first cubist painting, which approached painting figures in these ways of taking different views of the same object that are kind of condensed all at the same time. It was also a very shocking image at the time and sort of remains so. The women in the painting, of course, are all nude, but the original title and the story behind the work actually reveals that these women are all sex workers who Picasso painted from a brothel. And so it was quite scandalous at the time. The other thing that is very famous about the painting is that it was the first time that people were really seeing Picasso's influences that inspired this new form of cubism that he is credited with co-inventing along with the painter Georges Braque. Picasso has cited African art, and specifically African masks, as inspiring some of his early work. But many people, maybe Faith Ringgold included, can look at it and see that actually he was sort of mining another art form, another group of people's creativity for his own gain. And so in that way, by having this character in the middle, this black woman in the center, she's kind of recontextualizing that influence. So Picasso's works were heavily influenced by not only African art, but women's bodies, the women in his life. And so what she's done is kind of put this character front and center and made this quilt not about him, but really about her. The story that is happening within, that is told on the top and bottom registers, is sort of the inner monologue of Willia Marie as she's sitting there modeling. And it's told as if it was a letter back to her aunt in the States. And basically what she's saying is she finds modeling to be very boring, and as she's sitting there, she can hear the women in Les Demoiselles d'Avignon speaking to her. And the conversation that occurs is about this, is about her realizing that she is actually the source of Picasso's inspiration, her being, and talking about kind of taking that back and taking back that agency. One of the things she says in the letter to her aunt is that she had had a previous conversation with her about becoming an artist, and her aunt had asked her, why do you want to become an artist? And at the time she said that she didn't know why, and then she said, after this experience, thinking about being a model versus being an artist herself, she now knows why, and she said that her art is the freedom to say what she pleases. And so that is where the title of this exhibition comes from. Much of Faith Ringgold's art is what we would call semi-autobiographical fiction, meaning that although the greater story might have been made up, some parts of it, like the characters or some events, are based on Faith's own life and experiences. So in the case of Picasso's studio and the Greater French Collection, while Faith was not a young artist in the 1920s visiting Paris, she was once a young artist who did visit Paris, and she was a young black woman trying to find her place in a largely white art world. And so in that way, this work, as well as all the other works in the exhibition, are about Faith asserting her forms of art, Faith finding herself as an artist and becoming a unique voice in contemporary art in America. Faith Ringgold, Freedom to Say What I Please, is on view through March 17th. We look forward to seeing you here, and thank you so much for watching.